Being on Fiscal Oversight, we'll now come into session. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Raider.
Present.
Senator Bernskatter. Here. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman. Here. Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Here. Senator Rizzo. Senator Roberts. We have a quorum.
Seeing that we have a quorum, I now move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. We are now in executive session. I now move that we bring before the body for fiscal oversight House Bill 2287. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I now move that we do pass House Bill 2287. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? This is House Bill 2287. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Thompson Raider.
Aye.
Senator Bernskatter. Aye. Senator Searpoint. Senator Coleman.
Yes.
Aye. Yes.
Yes.
Senator Fitzwater. Senator Koenig. Aye. Senator Rizzo. Aye. Senator Roberts. 6-0.
By your vote of 6-0, you have moved House Bill 2287 do pass. I now move that we go out of executive session. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. We will now hear Senate Bill 993. Senator Brown, we are ready when you are.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Senator Ben Brown from the 26th District, and would like to thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 993. Today I present a proposal not only crucial to constituents within my district who are among the commuters and remote workers affected by the St. Louis earnings tax, but also vital for the economic health of Missouri. And it mirrors the same methodology that we've used to gradually reduce the state income tax as revenue increases over time. The city of St. Louis, a pivotal economic engine of our state, is hindered by an earnings tax of 1% on individuals and 0.5% payroll tax on businesses. This tax regime, regressive by nature, impacts every worker and business within St. Louis from their very first dollar earned or payroll expense incurred. Such a system discourages the establishment and growth of businesses within St. Louis and deters families from making the city their home. This bill seeks to address these challenges directly and responsibly. It outlines a gradual reduction of the earnings tax triggered by specific revenue growth markers. For instance, if the city's revenues grow by more than 3% a year, the earnings tax will decrease by 0.1% the following year. This structured reduction ensures a careful balance in fostering economic growth while maintaining essential city services. Furthermore, this legislation proposes the creation of an earnings tax reserve fund. This fund is designed to buffer the city's finances, safeguarding against potential shortfalls that may arise from the tax reduction. This strategic approach ensures that the vital city services remain uninterrupted, promoting a stable and certain urban environment. St. Louis's population decline from nearly 1 million residents to under 300,000 illustrates the urgent need for a change. Vacant and overgrown lots stand where thriving businesses and vibrant communities once were, particularly while neighboring areas continue to draw the economic activity that the city of St. Louis is losing. This bill represents a measured, calculated approach to revitalization by adjusting the tax burden. We aim to reverse the economic downturn and repopulate the downtown area, resulting in a stronger, safer, and more prosperous community. It is clear that the cost of inaction far outweighs the calculated risks associated with this proposal. Over the last several decades, we've seen the consequences unfold with significant economic and social impact. I urge you to support this legislation. It's time for Missouri to invest in the future of St. Louis, ensuring it can once again be a powerhouse driving our state's economy forward. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions? Senator Searpoint.
Thank you. Morning, Senator.
Morning.
I'm just curious, on here it says may be reduced. What's that mean? On line 9, it says, any city not within the county may be reduced over a period of years. Do I have the wrong copy?
Where are you at? Senator?
It's on line 9. I mean, that sounds like, who's that up to? Do we leave it up to the city? I'm not trying to trip you up. I was just curious. Usually things say shall or
Yeah, no.
if it's mandatory, and may if it's kind of flexible.
Yeah, and I'll take a look at that. That might be something that we might want to change to a shall there.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions for the Senator? Seeing none, thank you. Do we have anyone in favor? Anyone wishing to speak against? Please come forward. Be sure to fill out a witness form and proceed when you are ready.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Casey Milberg, and I'm the Policy Director for the City of St. Louis, Missouri. First and foremost, thank you all for your time this morning. I'm here to oppose the Senate bill due to the fiscal impact it would have on our city, our public safety services, and our other services that the city provides to our residents. As you all are likely aware at this point, having heard several bills about the earnings tax, it is a critical source of revenue for the city of St. Louis. The earnings tax itself amounts to 37% of the city's general fund budget. A lot of this revenue is used to support our public safety services. With public safety funding, it's important to have revenue that is largely stable, largely more insulated from economic downturns than other sources of revenue, and that is where we direct a lot of our earnings tax revenues towards. This bill, as has been discussed, would implement on a sort of revenue trigger model reduction to the rate, proposing a total elimination after a certain point of time. And this would have a very significant negative impact on city services. The fiscal note for the legislation demonstrates that on an annual, on a 0.01% rate reduction, the city would receive about $31.5 million less per year, which is a very substantial chunk of revenue per reduction. The total elimination would amount to about $269.5 million. By way of context, half the city's, by way of context, our fiscal year 24 general fund budget for the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department was $164.4 million. Our city's fire department's budget was $74.1 million. Our corrections and juvenile detention services budget was $53.3 million. The city's circuit court and circuit attorney and sheriff's office's budget were $33.3 million. So this would be very difficult for the city to continue operating services were it to go into effect. And last year we did see I believe a 5.3% increase in our total revenue. So it is likely that triggers would be met fairly expeditiously. And I think the final piece we wanted to draw attention to was the definition on page 2 of the bill. Subsection 6 on lines 30 through 35 contains the definition for the total funds that would be included in the annual revenue. It's included but not limited to taxes, fees, charges for services, grants, loans, or other intergovernmental transfers, court fines and forfeitures, leases and investment incomes. Some of these are likely to be one-time funds. For example, grants to the city. Financings, proceeds from financings are restricted to projects that are being financed. Grants are likewise restricted as to purpose and in many cases are non-recurring sources of revenue to the city. Enterprise fund revenues are likely to be used for purposes related to those businesses as enterprises as opposed to funding general city services. So just the volatility and non-recurring nature of what would be included in the definition of total revenue would also be a little problematic for the city as well. So we do oppose this, and I'm happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Koenig, proceed.
Hey, first of all, there is a reserve fund, and it is cutting only the growth of government, the growth So I do think it's appropriate. I mean, it's, nearly every city in the state outside of Kansas City and St. Louis does not have an earnings tax, and they're functioning just fine. In fact, they're probably functioning much better than Kansas City and St. Louis. As far as crime rates, on almost every level. As far as growth, I mean, the earnings tax is very destructive towards economic growth. Did I hear you correctly saying that the earnings tax is a stable tax?
What I stated was the earnings tax is more stable than other sources of income.
I mean, I don't have these studies specifically sitting in front of me, but I've done a lot of work in the tax arena, and when I've looked at those studies, when you're looking at the three buckets, income tax, consumption taxes, and property taxes, the income tax is the most volatile. In fact, some of those studies, when I was looking at those, when comparing income taxes and sales taxes specifically, it was like 50% more volatile than the consumption taxes. And I believe property taxes are also fairly stable. Do you have any evidence that that is the case?
I'd be happy to provide some for the committee.
All right.
Senator Searpoy, then we'll go to.
Thank you. This line 6 or section 6 says for the purposes of this subsection, annual revenue received shall mean it lists them all. So we just went through a COVID thing. Now I imagine the city received a lot of money from the federal government. Would that be part of this this number?
Line 31 says shall mean all revenue received from any source, so it would.
So that one-time money would also be included. Okay, thank you.
Senator Coleman.
Thanks for being here, Ms. Wilberg. I have a quick question, and I apologize for my ignorance in asking the question. What are the sources of the taxpayers who are paying the income taxes? My understanding is that's primarily W-2 filers and not K-1 filers. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's implemented currently on individuals who work with the nexus related to the city right now. There's, of course, ongoing litigation about the remote aspect of it.
Of course, but there's a number of high-earning family members or employers or employees who work and live in the city of St. Louis who receive their income, and that is taxed rather than through a W-2 format, through a K-1 format, and that means they're have some ownership nexus into the entity, and that entity may or may not actually be paying taxes into the city of St. Louis. So, for example, if they're working out of Clayton or some a suburb or exurb of the city, but they're choosing to live and work in the city or live in the city, those tend to be higher earners, people who file K-1s rather than W-2s. And my understanding is that this tax is only applicable. Is that correct, to W-2 filers and not K-1 filers?
I do wish our city collector's office was not able to be here today. And
do you mind just following up
I
with
would
me on
love
that?
to do
Because
that,
I
yes.
think that this is
Yes.
seems to be a fairly regressive tax where we're taxing the poor and the middle class rather than higher earners based on the way that statute is being interpreted. And I sure don't want to increase anybody's taxes, and I don't want to encourage anybody, especially higher earners, from moving or living in the city. But I think that the way you've structured the fundamental, running of the city on these dollars is rather than on higher earners. Instead, it's on lower and middle class families. And so finding out a percentage would be really helpful to that.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank
and we're
you.
happy to have them pull data on all the different individuals and how they identify that information. So happy to get that.
I appreciate it. Thank
Of
you.
course. Yeah.
Any further questions for this witness? Senator.
Thank you. If this legislation were to go into effect, what would the city have to do to make up for that budget shortfall?
We would have to cut services substantially, without question. As you are likely aware, last year we increased law enforcement salaries by a range of 8 to 13%. Fire salaries increased, at the same time. So it would force the city to start making some very difficult choices about the services that citizens are provided, about wages, about pensions to our, first responders. It would be difficult.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you so much. Please be sure to leave a witness form. Anyone else wishing to speak against? Anyone wishing to speak for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, would you like to have any closing comments?
Yes, once again, we'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity and just reiterate when, speaking about potential cuts, that any reduction would only occur if there were a 3% increase in growth or more. So it's just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 993. We will now hear SJR53. Oh, I'm like, where'd it go? Senator Eigel, we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. It's always a pleasure to be back here in the Fiscal Oversight Committee. I'm Senator Bill Eigel, and it's my pleasure to introduce Senate Joint Resolution 53, which, if passed and approved by the voters, would be a limitation on spending in Jefferson City, which couldn't come, I think, at a better time. We have increased spending in Jefferson City more in the past 5 years than maybe in the entire history of the state of Missouri. In fact, we've doubled our state budget just in the past 5 years. Our spending per person for the state of Missouri is now twice that of some other larger states like the state of Florida. So what SJR 53 would do is it would limit increases in spending, future increases in spending, to no more than an amount of the rate of inflation each year, so that we could maintain our current level of government spending per capita without going above that. It would also add a provision that in any years in which the revenues came in more than 1% higher than the rate of inflation, the monies would be put into a personal property tax reimbursement fund, which would basically be a fund that would be set up to slowly reimburse local areas as we then reduced the assessment rate on personal property and eventually got rid of personal property tax here in the state of Missouri. So it's kind of some of my favorite things all in one bill: a limitation on government spending and elimination of personal property tax, all by cutting future government revenue. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Wow.
I must have said it all. All right.
Do we have anyone who wishes to testify in favor? Anyone wishing to testify against?
I thought we were going to go all the way through.
Please be sure to leave a witness form and proceed when ready.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. Just for the sake of consistency, I think we would have to continue to oppose the Tabor-like restriction on appropriations. It's a little bit arbitrary to do it year by year when finances and state budgets and the economy can vary substantially, and you end up locking future legislatures into a situation that may be hard for them to handle. Also, just pointing out, this bill would reduce and eventually eliminate in a 4-year period the personal property tax. Just a sense of scale, it's similar to not passing the FRA in terms of its impact on the state budget in terms of general revenue. You're going to have to do House Bill 2 because there are several constitutional provisions that still include that in your job description. But you would then really be faced with some tough choices like, do we just skip till about House Bill 5 or 6, or do we get rid of most of 10 and 11? And so for those reasons, we just don't think it's practical, and we would oppose the joint resolution and urge a body that's very well informed on the state budget, the state Senate, since almost half of you all are in appropriations, we would urge you not to put this out before the voters without a full understanding of what it would do for the state budget. I'm happy to answer questions.
Do we have any questions from this witness? Senator Serpent,
Thank you.
proceed.
This is kind of Hancockish in a sense. How much are we under the Hancock limits right now? Is it $4 billion?
It's at least that, yes, sir. Yes,
Right.
miss.
So the taxation has been, other than voter-approved taxation, has been is much lower than it was back in the 80s.
Yeah, if you scale it with the economy, which is what the Hancock sought to do, we've basically gone from about 4% to about 3% in terms of the state the state expenditure is a fraction of the economy.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none?
Thank you,
so
Madam
much.
Chair.
Anyone else? Pardon me. Anyone else wishing to testify against? Anyone for informational purposes only? Seeing none? Senator, do you have any closing comments?
Just happy to be here, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This concludes our hearing on Senate Joint Resolution 53 and concludes with no other business coming before the committee. This concludes our Committee on Fiscal Oversight.